Local draft boards received little guidance on how to assess the sincerity of applicants, and there was no provision for alternative service. Consequently, the application of the act was very uneven. Ann M. Yoder, the since retired archivist of the Swarthmore College Peace Collection, cataloged about 4,000 men who applied for CO status in World War I. All COs had to report to military camps where their status was finalized. Here's what happened to the 4,000 men. 1,300 chose non-combatant service. 1,200 were assigned to farm work. 100 went to Europe with the American Friends Service Committee. 450 were sent to prison. And 900 stayed at the military camps and were discharged when the armistice was signed. The Selective Training and Service Act of 1940 created Civilian Public Service, or CPS. About 12,000 men participated in CPS during World War II. The College Mennonite Church Seniors for Peace published in 1965 the book titled Detour, Main Highway, Our CPS Stories. Pauline and John Fisher and Roy Umble were the book's publication committee. The book includes the personal stories of many CMC men who were in CPS and some women who were CO girls or COGs. And I understand we have about 3 or 4 copies of this in the church's library. From the early 1950s to the mid-1970s, about 170,000 men received CO status, but nearly 300,000 applicants were rejected. As in the past, the selective service rules were applied unevenly. The PAX program operated from 1951 to 1976. Unlike CPS, which allowed only domestic service, it was international and operated in 42 countries. About 1,200 men and women served in PAX. Calvin W. Redekop, in his book, The PAX Story, Service in the Name of Christ, provides this summaries of the program's effect. The PAX program began with the Korean War. It ended when the Vietnam War ended. Part of the PAX elan lay in the fact that PAX men and women understood that they were saying no to the American and world's war system, but they were also saying no to American hubris and the American way of being in the world. I believe many who did 1W work could make similar statements about their service. What many believe is more important than selective service laws and processes is how conscience objection affected individuals. Today, we have sojourners John Hertzler, Owen Hess, and Larry Yoder, who will share their alternative service stories. I asked them to spend no more than 10 minutes each to tell their story. I'll keep time, John. No. So we'll have plenty of time for questions and comments. They've decided on the order of Larry, John, Larry, John, Owen, and Larry. So I'll turn it over to you, John.
I was chosen to start because I'm the oldest. And I might not last long enough to be the seven questions or statements that we should respond to. Who provided you assistance, guidance, etc. in applying for conscientious objector status? And my response to that is, after graduating from high school in 1952, in order to delay starting college where I wasn't sure I belonged, I decided I might as well get my alternative service out of the way. I needed no assistance or guidance. And the second item, did your draft board accept without follow-up your 1W application, or did it require you to meet with board members? If so, what was that meeting like? And my response is, as I remember, I met with the board. They asked if I was a Mennonite and approved my application without further discussion or questioning. The meeting was quite uneventful. But that's what happened in Elkhart County. How did you choose your alternative service assignment? Please describe where and what your assignment was. Of our last major polio epidemic, there was a call out for help at Evanston General Hospital to work in the communicable disease ward. I am good at fixing things, so as I was tasked with keeping rocking beds, iron lungs, and other mechanical devices used with polio patients in working condition. My working title was senior nurse aide, so when I wasn't fixing stuff, I was doing bedside nursing and even worked in the communicable disease emergency surgery ward. An interesting aside on this emergency surgery ward is that in communicable disease circles, being are sterile is opposite from the normal operating room. And so in an emergency, people would come from the normal operating room and get all confused and wouldn't be sterile. And I had been taught in the disease ward to do things properly. And as they saw me sterilizing things in the autoclave and messing around in the emergency surgery ward, they said, "Hey, John, why don't you help us out in surgery?" And so I actually assisted in emergency surgery as a kid. And things like tracheotomies and another was about ready to deliver had died, and so we would remove the living fetus. Anyway, this was an interesting experience for little John. I was in Evanston General Hospital. Well, the epidemic was slowing down after I'd been there for about a year. For Simmons Army Hospital outside of Denver to become part of a medical nutritional guinea pig unit. 10 of us in the unit were subject to a number of different tests, lasting from a few days to 3 or 4 weeks. This was this year was with a lot more time to give it to you now. Did you face harassment or threats from anyone during, before, or after you were rendered your service? My response: no. In fact, I had a number of very positive responses and conversations about my conscientious objector status or my beliefs. While working at Evanston General Hospital, I lived in a house with 4 other men. One of us was another CO. I was a student at Northwestern University. Another was a retired military person working in downtown Chicago. And the last one was an active duty military person doing a civilian job. What interesting conversations we had, but we seldom were together at the same time. How did your 1W service affect your life? I've never been a good student and got my ability to apply through college, if indeed I wanted to do that route. Both experiences in Evanston and in Denver convinced me that I should at least give college a try. It has not been a military job for nearly 50 years. Have Anabaptists and other peace advocates lost everything by not being required to identify as conscientious objectors? I've wondered what our younger generation thinks about the issue. So I asked Simon Hertzler-Gasho, who has just graduated from GC, what he would do if there was a draft. He would claim the CO position. I'm guessing his GC experience helped him with that response. With fewer high school graduates choosing higher education, and if so, choosing something other than something like Goshen College, I'm thinking we will find adults choosing military. I'm thinking I would like to see a 2-year commitment for both male and female. 18 years of age with deferments for further education, etc. This would be for either military service or accepted alternative service, with those choosing an alternative service expanding how they chose that over the military. On the last item, what would you like to tell the sojourners? 2020, I put together a PowerPoint for the Sunday school class about my 1W experience. I probably could be talked into presenting this for the class sometime in the future. My presentation will be just a little different format. I got something from Mike on June 29th and four questions and try to answer them to the best. And it may be mixed throughout my talk here. In June 1954, I graduated from high school the next month. I was born and resided in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, so I registered soon after at the Selective Service Office in Lancaster. I'm the children, sisters, and 5 brothers. For that time, I had done any service. I was military service. My second oldest brother, Bob, had completed medical school during the period and served with MCC in China and Taiwan as a medical doctor from 1947 to 1949. Just I to declare I was a conscious serial objector. I received a final deferment, which is what 4 of my brothers had received. I spent the next year and a half working on the family file with my brothers and dad. Why did I choose to go to PAX? I first heard of PAX in the late summer of 1952. My dad church were part of the so Switzerland with the conference. in PAX that were in attendance at the conference. I don't remember ever seeing encouragement from ever encouraging to think of serving in PAX or one video. We lived about 20 miles from Akron, spent a day each year helping with sorting clothes at the MCC house, so another day at the new convention. We would come to our church, Monterey Mennonite, each year to present the work of MCC. He was given about 10 minutes between Sunday school and church service to talk about the work of MCC. Already in high school, I thought of the non-existent position. I returned to public high school for my junior and senior year after 3 years at modern schools. During my senior year, there was an essay contest that we could submit an essay on some patriotic theme. I wrote an essay on the 4 things that Franklin FDR spoke of in the State of the Union speech in 1941. Speech and expression, worship, right, and fear. I began with this premise and wrote about how this allowed us to be good citizens as conscientious objectors to war. I was told I had good content, but my essay wasn't original since it started with the reference to FDR's speech. Quite a few of the teachers at East Donegal High School had served in the military too. I began feeling strongly of volunteering to serve to demonstrate my conviction. I have a friend who knew several Vice Fellows in Germany in PAX in 1955. We also had 2 Stafford cousins at the time. I also got to know John Schiff and Elizabeth for PAX in Germany, December 1955. I made some inquiries at MCC offices in Akron, signed up for PAX. Through my contacting my draft board, MCC submitted acceptance to an application. I have a opinion of the record draft board. I don't recall any interview of the draft board. I didn't have physical examination, military physical examination. My family covered the $1,800, which was asked by MCC to cover expenses for the 2 years. I went with my family's blessing. After a week of orientation, I was on the way to 10 other fellows for 2 years of service. We sailed on March 19th, 1956. It's an orientation where I first met Walter Smoker, who I see here today. My first assignment was to Bachmann, Germany. The work at Bachmann had 6 months until it was completed. At completion period, 23-story apartment houses and a church built out with PAX labor over 30 years. While there, I got to hear stories of refugees who were living there. We sang in the choir with the youth at the Mennonite church. The Bachmann City basketball team played throughout the year. 2 Americans were allowed to each team. John Huber and I played on the Bachmann team. We played some games in the U.S. military courts against teams with GIs on the opposing team. Here at Lawrence included before breakfast, Sunday school after attending church services, subsequent assignments were to Valgrad, France for about 3 months project of bikes for the children's home. Then Australia, a joint project with service to refurbish school. 10 months were spent in Algeria. These assignments were involving construction work. Mr. Crowley is a Highland manufacturer's list. Was traveling. During the summer of 1957, the conference was held at Karlsruhe, Germany. We were given time off to attend the conference. PAX and broadening as to what MCC and other programs were doing. I also became a friend of the French Reformed Baptist and Methodist were doing in French Algeria at that time. It was really PAX when I considered attending college. I returned from PAX in 1958, worked this summer, and began college at Goshen in September. My life changed because of my PAX experience. I started college in the fall of 1958. I gave myself the time to figure out what I wanted from life. My mother reminded me several years, but I could always come back and find. I followed the work of MCC since PAX, and I've been a financial supporter. My college experience led to me acquiring a keen interest in often topics in college history. I recently watched a film on the Peace Corps titled Empowering Task. Veterans of that service relate their experience going back 60 years for some. MCC PAX was discontinued soon after the military war stopped, as March mentioned in 1976. John Orland was my major history class, and he wrote a book in 2000. He had it was a compilation of a number of essays, and I thought I had the sheet here. But essentially, what he one sentence that he said in that, or one couple of sentences, was that he had served in CPS for 3 years in the U.S. And when the conscription law came out in 1940 or 41, they said, okay, Mennonites can operate their CPS kings, Quakers, but you can't go abroad. You're allowed to have everything coming in the United States. And he said, you know, that it frustrated him. And they wanted to show that they weren't doing something out of cowardness, that they could, you know, do something in another environment. And anyway, he subsequently spent 3 years in MCC service in Europe before he came back to college. He had 1 year before he started in CPS, before he was drafted. So he writes this in a book called How the Good People Out of the World. Larry? Okay. Yeah, thank you. This is the first time I'm talking to a group since I had a stroke 6 years ago. So bear with me. I received my 1W status when I was a senior in college. I remember registering, and my pastor helped me fill out those forms, and we took him to the draft board. Of course, I was in LaGrange County, so we're just about like Elkhart County. Mennonites were well known. So I received my 1W status in college. I had my choice of things to do. I was most interested in doing something in mental health. I could have chosen PAX, but I felt instead mental health had far greater draw for me. The reason for this is that my sister experienced a postpartum depression when I was a junior in college. I found the experience
very mysterious and disturbing. My sister got help at Brooklyn, but it took years to really recover. Through that experience, I became aware of Prairie View in Kansas and Kingsview in California. First of all, I applied to MCC for a mental health assignment. They accepted my application and assigned me to Kingsview Hospital in Reedy, California. Orientation was in Akron, Pennsylvania during the summer of 1959. In late summer of 59, I moved to California. I arrived not knowing what to expect. I first got my assignment to the wards. I remember encountering my first psychotic patient. Again, I found it very mysterious. But with the help of the staff and the professionals, I soon became comfortable. After working there for several months, they asked me to go to the activities department. In the activities department, you weren't assigned to wards, but you had the opportunity to encounter patients and work with patients all day long, whatever ward they were in. After several months in that position, they asked me to be director of activities for Kingsview Hospital. I was in that position for the rest of my voluntary service assignment. Kingsview was a fairly small hospital with about 70 patient population. Working activities, I had to come up with various things to do for the patients. Examples were volleyball, cookouts, hikes, boat rides, games, and so forth. Each activity provided me a good opportunity to relate to patients. I was included in patient care meetings where they identified the problem and the desired outcomes of the psychiatrists, social workers, and nurses. I learned so much for having had this opportunity. Art Jost, the administrator of Kingsview and grandfather of David, who was part of our congregation, took me under his wings. He became my mentor, inviting me to go with him to hospital meetings, helping him to host the MCC Mental Health Board when it was Kingsview's time to host. As I look back at that experience, I realized that what a privilege that was. I got to know many of the early members of mental health, such as H. Claire Amstutz, Oriole Miller, Elmer Edgar, and many Canadians. And they were all a mix of Mennonite General Conference and Mennonite Brethren. We also had some, being a part of a voluntary service unit, we had a unit already established in Reedley, and there were about 10 of us in the unit. We had time off, so we had time to hike the mountains and learn to know about backpacking and many different landscapes in the mountains. We also got to visit many things along the West Coast. As my voluntary service ended, I began to evaluate my experience. I learned many important experiences that would help me for the rest of my life. I would be more aware of mental health issues that can creep into the relationships. I began to wonder if the government hadn't forced young people from the church to work in state hospitals, would the Mennonite Church ever have established mental hospitals? These hospitals are very different from what the CPS men and women found in state hospitals they were assigned to. When my VS term ended, Art Jost asked me if I would visit the West Coast Mennonite congregations on behalf of Kingsview. They were part of Kingsview because they were Mennonite and part of MCC, but they really found themselves somewhat distant and not giving much thought to this relationship. That was quite an undertaking, But I said I would do it, and I did it for 3 months. It was a very interesting experience losing all these congregations, which are quite different. But I also learned that I did not want to be a traveling salesman. Before I came back to Indiana, I had a call from Bob Hausler, who was overseeing building of Oaklawn, asking whether I would consider the business manager position. When I returned to Indiana, Oaklawn was a hole in the ground in Elkhart. I decided to pursue an MBA at IU School of Business, and upon graduating, I returned to the Oaklawn staff. While working at, no, in the meantime, Kingsview received a grant to establish a community mental health center in Bakersfield, California. Community mental health centers were being promoted by the Kennedy administration, and no one really knew what they were. They had 5 different aspects that they had to fulfill. But Kingsview was having difficulty getting it established in Bakersfield. They asked whether I would take one leave of absence and come to Bakersfield and help get it established. Oaklawn agreed, and we moved to Bakersfield. Once in the job, I began to realize that the job would take more than 1 year, and I resigned my position at Oaklawn. I became the administrator of Carnegie Mental Health Center and Hospital for the next 14 years. The 1-year move to California lasted nearly 15 years before we returned to Indiana. In total, I served 22 years with Mennonite Mental Health Services. Yeah.
Okay, hang on to that one. Yeah, yeah, any questions, comments, rebuttals? John, we have one over here.
Thank you for your service. We say that's said often to military personnel, but I want to say to each of you, thank you for your service.
I want to ask you, John, you commented something about it'd be a good idea to require 2 years of service of everybody. Would you say more about that? Well, I think aside from I just think that all really young adults need to be more aware of what's going on and having a required 2-year service, whether it's in the military or in some civilian. In a way, it's something I've been thinking about, not because I'm a CO, but just because I think it's important for really young adults to become more aware of their responsibility in their new adult life. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
I would very much agree with you, John. But I didn't realize that the PAX program stopped when the draft stopped, which seems to me is a very unfortunate decision. Does anybody know, was it finances or why was PAX stopped?
I don't really know, but in 2001, we were scheduled the week to have a meeting at Oakwood in Syracuse. And that was right after, it was the weekend that followed 9/11. And there was at least one person, it was really saying, why don't we get this going again? Well, nothing really came out of that. There was a really good conference, but nothing came out of it. And it stopped. I think other programs too. I mean, there were less people in one bedroom, less people in US and the US after the draft. After the draft became obsolete, you might say. You have any?
Here, I got it, Dick.
One of the characteristics that all three of you spoke of is putting positions of greater responsibility that would be available for 18 and 19-year-olds. I wonder if any of you wish to speak to that. Well, for me, it was very humbling, and I think I probably didn't have a very good self-image, and the work that I did was was a very affirming. People thanked me for it and said I'm doing a good job. Does that answer your question?
Larry, you want?
It was a good experience. Saw patients recovering and becoming whole again. And that's for the most part. But the greatest part was the service part. Visit the churches on the West Coast, including John Leverlock back there. Got a lot of my letters. It doesn't fit what you think on it. But no, just leave it at that. I come from a very conceited Mennonite community. Lancaster County, home of Lancaster Conference Mennonites. Anyway, PAX changed me significantly, and we're talking about 3 years that occurred in the first quarter of my life. I finished PAX at 22, just about 22, and now I'm 88. So, it changed my life significantly. I enjoyed living in the family, but I know I'm not there anymore. But I'm thinking perhaps made a significant change in my life. Well, you have a second story to tell. You skipped over it, and that's the nutritional volunteerism that you did. Tell us that briefly. You usually go on and on about it. Please. Well, that was part of my 1 year for St. John's Hospital. I was employed officially by the NIH National. But I was on a military base in a military hospital. One of the outbuildings had been converted for medical nutritional experience tests. Had to get permission from my parents to be a part of this because
we were going to be exposed to irradiated food. And this, the perception was this wasn't possibly healthy. The interesting thing is that the only thing we did during this 1 year on irradiated food was about 2 days of eating food to determine whether the radiation changed the texture of it or the taste. It had nothing to do with the radiation. But the other it was discovered after the Second World War upon the return of American prisoners of war in Japan that these people should be dead, not alive. That they were, how do I explain this? The perceived value of the foods that they were eating, that they were given as prisoners of war, wasn't enough to sustain life. So they decided, well, maybe the values of food weren't correct because they had been on animals. And let's do it with humans.
Yeah.
And the first part of it was done with military prisoners. And prisoners did a lot of cheating. And the military thought, well, let's see, we've got these COs, and I wonder if we can do a better job with them. And so we were the first group of conscientious objectors to participate in this. And the first part was to determine the caloric value of potatoes. And what was the third thing?
Steak.
Steak, yeah. So, a steak. And this is something that I'll go into separately on another class. But before this started, all 10 of us were supposed to do our activities every day to determine how many calories it took to maintain us. And at my 18 years of age and playing golf 18 holes a day and swimming every day and doing what I did would take 3,000 calories a day. And this amounted to 4 pounds of potatoes a day. And well, I got pictures. So it's broken up into 3 sections. High protein, which was more steak and less potatoes and butter. And high fat, with a lot of butter with fewer potatoes and steak. And high carbohydrate with all kinds of potatoes. Measure 4 pounds of potatoes at home sometime. It was a fascinating experience. And the military people that took care of us just couldn't believe the sacrifice that we were doing, taking. And I was thinking we were having such a ball. it was a wonderful week of my life. And after, at one point, I got a call from about a farmer in the south who said, I'm coming through Goshen, I want to stop and talk to you. And this was a fireman who had been working with us. And he expressed so much thanks for what we did. And we became kind of friends over the years. And it's just amazing to me that I was having such a lark.
Yeah, thank you. We look forward. One last question. Anybody want to ask the final question? Well, I guess all's been said. So thank you, gentlemen. Oh, wait a minute. We got one? Oh, okay. Ann, sure.
I just wondered whether anyone knows whether the impetus for President John Kennedy's Peace Corps stemmed from what was being started here in the Mennonite and peace churches.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, Vic's gonna answer that. Okay. As Mark said, there's a book by Calvin Reddekopp on PAX and related level of issues, and he addresses that question. And he says there's a possibility, but there's no clear proof that one actually led to the other that you could document. But there was, in terms of the passage of time, that was right. One was before the other. But they only think there's a possibility, no proof. The PAX program started as a VS program in Europe, and Arnold Roth was with the first group that went over, a group of 20. They ended up going to Espel Camp, starting a project there, and also Norway, Germany. They worked between the two. They made the blocks that went into the housing, and they made those at Norway. They transported them to Espel Camp. Espel Camp later became the Conservative Mennonite Conference took over that. And there were four major units that built housing for German refugees. One was at Vega in the north, Enkenbach, which is more along the almost closer to the Rhine, Bachmann, which is where I was in completion. Now young was with probably the first school program, the first in the community. After a long year of fellows being overloaded, they retroactively got rather directly given affirmation later. And General Fisher, who was the head of selective service, he was there at Espel Camp and saw that project. So people in government this existed, so I'm not sure the part of the park, like Rick said. I think Cal looked into that pretty thoroughly, and there's no direct relation.
All right. Thank you again for sharing your service, and thank you for your service.
Yeah. One quick